The nightmare always started the same way. Gettysburg, July, 1863. Confederate grape shot screaming across the wheat field, and Private Tommy Morrison, barely 18, with hair like wheat stubble, crying for his mother as shrapnel tore through his chest. In the dream, Boone could never reach him in time. Could never stop the boy's blood from painting Pennsylvania soil red, could never forget that final whisper, "Tell Ma I tried to be brave." But Tommy Morrison had been dead for 5 years now, and Boone Cassidy was awake in the dusty marketplace of Lantern's End, watching 2 women kneel in chains. The iron shackles caught the dawn light like broken promises. The sound they made, metal grinding against bone, sent lightning through Boone's chest. He'd heard chains before in Andersonville prison, where Union boys died like animals, where kids like Tommy went to waste away forgotten. "Step up, gentlemen." Cale Brennan's voice boomed across the crowd, his frame casting shadows like a thundercloud. The slaver stood near 7 feet, arms thick as fence posts, black beard reaching his chest. When he cracked his bullwhip, both women flinched hard. Prime stock here, fresh from ranch country, trained for all manner of service. Boone's horse shifted beneath him as he studied the scene from the crowd's edge. His right hand, the one that shook since Yankee shot crushed the bones at Chancellorsville, gripped the reins until his knuckles went white. The scar running temple to jaw began its familiar throb. The older woman might have been 25, dark hair hanging loose around a face marked by fresh bruises. Her calico dress was torn at the shoulder, showing purpled skin beneath. But her eyes, coffee dark and hard as flint, held no surrender. She knelt straight back, chin raised, staring past the jeering crowd like she could see clear to tomorrow. The younger one was maybe 20, same dark hair, same proud jawline. Her simple dress was worse off, torn and stained until it barely covered her decently. She trembled with each crack of Cale's whip, but when she lifted her head, Boone saw steel there. Intelligence. The look of someone keeping score. And suddenly, he wasn't seeing 2 strangers in chains. He was seeing the daguerreotype Tommy Morrison had carried his mother and sister back in Ohio, standing proud in their Sunday dresses. Women who'd never know how their boy died, who'd spend their lives wondering if he'd been brave when the darkness came. "Isabel here's got fire to warm your nights and sense to run your house," Kyle announced, grabbing the older woman's chin. She jerked away, earning a backhand that snapped her head sideways. "And sweet Mara's soft as spring rain. Won't stay that way long, so bid accordingly." The crowd exploded in crude laughter and shouted offers. A fat merchant waved bills like a flag. "60 for both. 75, I'll break 'em gentle." Boone watched hope die in Isabel's eyes as the bidding climbed. Watched Mara start to rock, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. The sight hit him like artillery fire, sudden, devastating, complete. His money pouch held 14 silver dollars, 2 copper pennies, and a brass button from his cavalry uniform. His Colt Army .44 hung at his hip, scarred from 8 battles. His horse was borrowed, his saddle battle-worn. Everything he owned, and it wasn't much, but it was enough to matter. "Hold up, Cale." Boone's voice cut through the morning air, sharp as a saber. The crowd turned to stare this scarred man in faded cavalry blue and patches. Some laughed at his appearance, but Cale's pig eyes narrowed with interest. "Well now," the slaver rumbled. "What we got here? Another hero looking to play savior." Boone dismounted slow, his damaged left leg protesting. He limped through the crowd, spurs jangling, until he stood at the platform's edge. "What's your price for both women?" Cale's grin showed teeth like broken gravestones. $100 cash. No promises, no credit. Got $14. Boone emptied his pouch coins, catching light like fallen stars. 2 pennies, and this button from the 5th New York Cavalry. The crowd erupted. $14, hell, that won't buy decent boots. But Cale wasn't laughing. His eyes had fixed on Boone's revolver and cavalry saddle. Something hungry flickered in his expression, anticipation, maybe calculation. "Tell you what, soldier boy," Kale said, voice carrying clear across the marketplace. "Feeling generous this morning? Throw in that pretty gun and saddle, we got a deal." Boone's hand moved toward his Colt. The weapon had been his companion 6 years through Antietam, Chancellorsville, the hell of Gettysburg. He knew its weight better than his own heartbeat, its balance better than his own step. But looking at Isabel and Mara in those chains, seeing Tommy Morrison's family in their faces, he knew there was no choice. "Done," he said, unbuckling his gun belt. The crowd went silent as Boone handed over his revolver. He walked to his horse, began working the saddle free with hands that barely trembled, now steadied by purpose instead of shaken by memory. "You gone simple, mister," someone called. "Them girls ain't worth dying for." Boone ignored him, focused on buckles and straps. When he'd piled his life at Cale's feet, the slaver nodded with satisfaction. "Well, boys, got ourselves a genuine saint." Mockery in Cale's tone, but something else too like this scene was playing exactly as planned. "Hope you don't regret this by sundown, hero." Kyle tossed him keys. Boone knelt beside the women, met Isabel's gaze as he worked the first shackle. Coffee, dark eyes that held strength, intelligence, and maybe, just maybe, gratitude. "Can you stand?" She nodded, though her legs nearly buckled when she tried. Boone caught her arm, steadied her, as he freed Mara's chains. The younger woman looked up at him, then same dark eyes as her sister, same proud bones beneath the fear. As the last shackle fell, the crowd began dispersing. But Boone noticed several men who stayed back, rough characters, who kept glancing his way, muttering among themselves. One lean man with a hatchet face spat in the dirt, said something to Cale that made the slaver laugh like thunder. "There you go, soldier," Kyle called cheerfully. "Bought and paid for fair and square." But as Boone led the women away, he caught the hatchet-faced man trailing behind. The man's hand rested easy on his gun butt, teeth showing in what might have been a smile. Trouble coming. Boone could smell it like smoke on the wind, in the same way he'd sensed Confederate cavalry before they topped the ridge. He'd walked into something bigger than a slave auction, and now all three would pay. The sun climbed higher as they left the marketplace, painting the street gold and amber. Behind them, Kyle's laughter rolled like distant thunder. They'd made maybe 50 yards when the hatchet-faced man stepped into their path. Up close, he looked like a sidewinder in human skin, all sharp angles and predator patience. "And hold up there, hero," the man drawled, hand near his gun. "Name's Pike. Got words for you." Boone stopped, keeping his body between Pike and the women. Isabel's grip found his arm surprisingly strong. Mara pressed close to her sister, both watching Pike like rabbits scenting wolves. "Speak your piece," Boone said, calculating distances, cover. Without his Colt, he had only the skinning knife, poor odds against armed men. Just a friendly warning. Pike said, tongue flicking his cracked lips. "You ain't gonna keep them pretties long." Paid fair. Pike's laugh was gravel in a tin cup. "Oh, you paid. But here's the beauty of our arrangement. First you pay, then we take 'em back. Then you're branded thief and killer, and we got righteous cause for hunting." Isabel's nails dug through Boone's shirt. She understood the auction was set up from the start. "Why, tell me." "Professional courtesy. Plus, Cale likes his sport. Wants to give you running room before we come calling." Pike spat tobacco juice near Boone's boots. "Makes better hunting." Behind Pike, more of Cale's men were spreading through the streets, taking positions, disappearing into alleys. The trap was closing, but they were giving him time to see it, to taste false hope before they crushed it. "The water trough's around the corner." Boone said quiet words for the women, but loud enough for Pike. "Get you cleaned up." Pike nodded approval. "That's right. Tend your property while you can." Walking away, Boone felt Pike's eyes like forge heat on his back. At the trough, he helped both women drink, used his kerchief to clean their cuts. Isabel had a deep gash on her forearm, needing stitches. Mara's wrists were raw where the shackles bit. "We need to move," he said quiet, glancing back where Pike's men were positioning. "Won't give us much." Gunfire cracked the morning air. A bullet whined past his ear, struck the trough, sent up splinters and dirty water. "Run." The second shot shattered the barbershop window as Boone grabbed both women's hands, pulled them into motion. More shots followed bullets, chipping adobe, kicking dust from the street. Pike's voice rose above the gunfire, directing with calm efficiency. "Or throw Johnny that roof. Don't let him reach the stable." But Boone had spotted their chance narrow alley between General Store and Blacksmith. He pulled Isabel and Mara toward the gap-damaged leg, screaming as they ran. Mara stumbled on loose stones, bare feet slipping. Boone scooped her up, threw her over his shoulder, her weight making old wounds throb, but not slowing him. Isabel stayed close hand, clutching his shirt as they plunged into the alley. The passage stank of garbage and waste, barely wide enough for two. But it offered cover from gunfire. Behind them, boots pounded Main Street as Pike's men gave chase. "There," Isabel pointed where the alley opened onto a side street. "The stable." They burst out just as Pike's bullet struck a hanging oil lamp overhead. Glass shattered, burning oil splashed onto a hay cart. Dry straw caught instantly, flames leaping to block their path. Back. Boone spun, but Pike was emerging from the alley, gun raised. Only option was the livery stable. Boone kicked the door, his cavalry boots splintering boards around the lock. They tumbled inside as Pike's bullet buried in the doorframe where Boone's head had been. Chaos inside. Gunfire and flames had spooked the horses, rearing, kicking in their stalls, eyes rolling white. A big chestnut stallion had broken free, charging back and forth, seeking escape. Boone set Mara down, drew his skinning knife. Through the doors, he could see Pike's men positioning cutting escape routes. Fire was spreading from the hay cart, smoke filling the air. "The horses," Isabel said, steady despite the chaos. "You ride." "Used to." "Ranch-born," she said, simple. The chestnut charged past again, foam flying from its mouth. Boone waited till it wheeled, then stepped into its path, hands raised. Man and horse faced each other in the smoke-filled stable. The animal seemed to recognize something in Boone's stance, authority, calm command from cavalry days. It slowed, stopped flanks, heaving. Boone approached slow, speaking soft like he had with war horses. "Easy now, boy." But reaching for a bridle, his damaged hand betrayed him. Leather slipped from trembling fingers, hit the straw floor. His hand moved instinctively toward his hip, toward the Colt that wasn't there. Unarmed, wounded, trapped in a burning building with two women who couldn't defend themselves. Outside, Pike was calling orders. "We got 'em pinned, fire's spreading, they'll come out soon." Through wall gaps, Boone could see 6 riflemen, patient and professional. They had time now. Eventually, flames would force them out. Isabel appeared at his shoulder, fingers steady, helping with the bridle. "My father raised horses," she said, quiet. "Before Dalton stole our land. First real information either woman had shared. The name Dalton sent ice through Boone's chest." "Who's Dalton?" "The man who put us in chains," Isabel replied, swinging up behind Mara on the horse. "Sheriff Coleman Dalton, reason we're running." Flames were licking the stable's far end now. Boone slapped the stallion's hindquarters hard. The animal leaped forward as Pike's shot went wide, splintering a roof beam. They burst through the rear door into pandemonium. Fire had spread to 3 buildings, townspeople running with water buckets. In the smoke and confusion, Pike's trap fell apart. "The creek," Boone shouted to Isabel, pointing toward hills beyond town. "Stay low." The stallion carried the women through chaos, while Boone ran alongside, using smoke for cover. Behind them, Pike cursed and shouted, trying to reorganize. They reached town's edge, plunged into the dry creek bed, winding into hills. Hard-packed earth was easier on Boone's leg than rocky ground above banks providing rifle cover. But they couldn't maintain this pace. Women exhausted, horse-blown, Boone's strength failing. Quarter-mile out, Isabel called halt. They found shelter where the creek curved cottonwoods, creating natural cover. Boone helped both women down, collapsed against the bank. "Let me see," Isabel said, kneeling beside him. A bullet had grazed his left side during escape, tearing his shirt, leaving bloody furrow along his ribs. Not deep, but bleeding freely. While Isabel tore dress strips for bandages, Mara took position at the bank, watching their back trail. Her silence wasn't just trauma, there was calculation in it, watchful intelligence. "She doesn't talk much," Isabel explained, following his gaze. "Not since Dalton's men came." "What happened?" "Our father owned the Broken W, 10,000 acres of the finest land in 3 territories, water rights to the whole valley. When he died 2 years back, left it all to Mara. She was his favorite, figured I'd marry well enough." Isabel paused, tying the bandage harder than needed. "Mara was engaged to Sheriff Dalton then. We trusted him, thought he loved her more than the land, but he wanted the property. More than that. The Broken W controls water for half the valley. Whoever owns it can make or break every ranch in the territory." Isabel's voice went hard. 3 months ago, Dalton came with papers claiming our father signed before he died, giving Dalton power of attorney over everything. Said Mara was too young to manage such property. Forgeries. Had to be. But Dalton was sheriff, his brother, the territorial judge who witnessed them. Who'd challenge him? Isabel glanced at Mara. "When she refused to sign over willingly, he had us arrested for trespassing and cattle theft. Said we needed schooling in respecting law." Pieces falling into place. "He sold you to Cale. 400 total, 200 each." Bitterness like acid in Isabel's voice. "The man supposed to marry my sister sold us like prize cattle." Distant baying caught their attention, hounds. Pike had found their trail, bringing dogs to track through hills. "How long?" Boone asked. Mara spoke, first time since the marketplace, voice hoarse but clear. "Hour, maybe. Those dogs know their work." In the distance, riders moved along the ridgeline above town. Too many for just Pike's crew, too organized for random posse. Someone had called reinforcements. They were running out of hiding places. But as they prepared to move, Boone caught something in Cale's distant shout that made his blood freeze. "Find 'em quick. The boss wants this done clean before them. Federal boys come sniffing." Federal boys. This went deeper than simple slave trading. The abandoned cabin sat in a natural bowl between Hill's roof, half-collapsed walls, weathered silver. But it offered shelter and concealment, all they could ask in country like this. Dawn of the second day brought gray light and the sound of rain on broken shingles. Also the distinctive click of a revolver being cocked. "Morning, folks," a lean voice said from the doorway. "Name's Jonas Briggs. Got papers say you're worth considerable money, dead or alive." Boone's hand moved toward his missing colt. Beside him, Isabel was awake, tense as coiled wire. Mara feigned sleep, but watched through cracked lids. Briggs stepped inside, gun-trained professional on Boone. Younger than Pike, but moving with practiced precision. Well-made clothes, travel-stained. Boots showing long saddle wear. "That wound's gone bad," Briggs observed, nodding at Boone's blood-soaked shirt. "Fever's got you. Makes men do foolish things." True enough. Despite the cold rain heat radiated from Boone's body, thoughts moving through thick syrup. Infection had crept in overnight. What's the bounty for theft of human property, assault on peace officers resisting arrest? Briggs pulled a folded paper, held it up. "Sheriff Dalton's signature, all legal. Says you killed 2 deputies already." Lie. Maybe. But 500 spends, same either way. Briggs's finger tightened on trigger. "Nothing personal, just business." Isabel moved fluid as creek water, one moment lying still, next on her feet, hands raised in surrender. "Wait!" she said, stepping between Briggs and Boone. Before you pull that trigger, you should know who we are. Don't care who you are, care what you're worth. I'm Isabel Whitman. This is Mara. Our father was Thomas Whitman, maybe you heard the name. Something flickered in Briggs's eyes. Thomas Whitman was known 3 territories over as honest rancher, fair dealer. Tom Whitman's been dead 2 years. And Sheriff Dalton stole our land with forged papers, sold us to slavers to keep us quiet. Isabel stepped closer, voice hardening. You want to collect blood money for a corrupt sheriff, that's your choice. But know what kind of man you're working for. Sheriff's money spent same as anyone's. But doubt crept into Briggs's expression. Isabel pressed advantage, reached into her torn dress, pulled out folded paper somehow kept hidden through everything. Original deed to our father's ranch, she said, holding it visible. Signed by Thomas Whitman, witnessed by Judge Morrison before he passed. Compare it to whatever forgeries Dalton showed you. Briggs hesitated, gun wavering. In that uncertainty, Mara struck. She'd been working a loose stone from the crumbling fireplace, while Isabel talked movements hidden by shadows. When Briggs glanced at the deed, Mara came up like lightning rock clutched in both hands. Stone caught Briggs behind his left ear with a wet crack. He dropped silent, revolver clattering across dirt floor. Dead. Boone breathed, struggling up. Mara checked pulse at his throat. No, but he'll wake with powerful pain. They bound Briggs with his own rope, gagged him with blanket strips. His horse outside, good animal for hard travel. But Boone's fever spiked again, vision swimming. He collapsed against the wall. We can't travel like this, Isabel said, hand to his forehead. Burning up. Infection spreading. Mara agreed, examining his side. Without proper medicine, won't last the day. Through wall gaps, riders moved through distant hills, 10 men spread in search pattern. Net closing options running out. Leave me, Boone whispered. Take his horse ride for territorial capital. You got the deed proof enough of Dalton's crimes. Not without you, Isabel said, firm. You saved us. We don't abandon people who save us. Besides, Mara added with first hint of humor, who'd believe 2 women against a sheriff need you alive to tell your side. As Isabel helped him toward Briggs' horse, she made discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the bounty hunter's saddlebags, official territorial marshal's badge papers, identifying Briggs as Deputy U.S. Marshal working undercover. He's not just bounty hunter, she said, holding up the badge. He's federal law. Implications hit Boone like cavalry charge. Whatever game Dalton played, he'd just put bounty on federal officers' head. That kind of mistake could bring down territorial government, but it meant their situation just got infinitely more complicated. Federal marshals didn't work alone. When one went missing, others came looking. Question was whether Briggs's backup would arrive in time, or if Dalton would silence all witnesses first. Sound of baying hounds was closer now. Time running out, nowhere left to run. Behind them, something made Briggs stir, groan against his gag. The bounty hunter's eyes fluttered open, focused on Isabel with dawning recognition. He was trying to say something through the gag, struggling against his bonds, not angry, urgent, like he had something important to tell them. Should we? Isabel started. No time, Mara said, helping Boone into the saddle. Dogs'll be here soon. But as they rode away, Boone caught sight of Briggs in the cabin doorway, somehow having worked partly free. The marshal was pointing frantically toward the distant mountains, mouthing something behind his gag, warning them about something. Or maybe trying to tell them where to run. They'd never know which. Day 3 brought them to Willow's Creek, normally running clear and shallow. But mountain storms had turned it into raging torrent brown with runoff and debris. What should have been easy crossing had become deadly river. Boone clung to saddle horn with his good hand, fever making the world shimmer like heat waves. Infection had spread through his body like poison, and Isabel's bandages were soaked with blood and pus. Every breath felt like drawing fire. There, Isabel pointed across Swollen Creek to where Game Trail led into rocky hills. If we can cross, lose them in stone country where dogs can't follow scent. But the creek ran fast and deep, uprooted trees creating deadly snags. Worse pursuit had grown louder all morning, individual voices shouting orders through rain. Spread along the bank. Voice Boone didn't recognize, but authority unmistakable. Don't let them cross. First wave of riders burst from tree line as they reached creek bank. 8 men led by tall figure in black coat sitting his horse like born to saddle. Even at distance, Boone could see silver star on the man's vest. Sheriff Coleman Dalton had come to finish this himself. End of the line. Dalton called across rushing water voice, carrying despite storm. Throw down weapons, surrender. Maybe you live to see trial. We don't have weapons. Isabel called back, though her hand was helping Boone draw his skinning knife, only blade they possessed. Dalton's laugh was winter cold. You've murdered my deputies, assaulted federal marshal. That stolen horse, those escaped prisoners. I'd say that's grounds to shoot you where you sit. Sheriff spurred closer men spreading along bank. All had rifles out, trained with professional precision. But Boone noticed something in their positioning, experienced men, but nervous. Way they glanced at each other, some avoiding looking at the women directly, suggested not everyone comfortable with what they were asked to do. Marshal Briggs is alive and well. Mara called out, speaking first time since cabin. Tied safe where anyone can find him. Hear what he says about your bounty. My word against criminals. Dalton replied smooth. Seeing as you attacked federal officer in commission of duties, don't think his testimony carries weight. But one of Dalton's men, grizzled veteran with gray beard, scarred hands, speaking of honest work, lowered his rifle slightly. Sheriff, these women look awful like the Whitman girls. Tom Whitman's daughters. Tom Whitman's daughters died in house fire 6 months back. Dalton said quick. Along with all their papers. These are criminals using stolen names. Now that's a lie. Isabel's voice rang across water with force of absolute truth. I'm Isabel Whitman. This is Mara. Our father was Thomas Whitman, owner of the Broken W Ranch, and this man murdered him to steal our land. Grizzled veteran straightened in saddle recognition dawning. I knew your father, miss. Worked roundup for him 3 seasons. Good man, honest dealer. Then you know he'd never sign away our inheritance. Mara added, voice carrying same strength. You know Sheriff Dalton's lying to all of you. Murmurs began rippling through posse as men looked at each other with growing uncertainty. Several had known Thomas Whitman, personally dealt with him in business, shared drinks in town. Idea that his daughters were alive, that their sheriff was involved in his death, was shaking their faith. Enough! Dalton's voice cracked like whip desperation edging in. These women are convicted criminals. That man's a murderer. Anyone believing their lies is fool. But damage was done. Grizzled veteran lowered rifle completely, several others following. Solid front of posse was cracking doubt, spreading like fire through dry grass. Sheriff, another man called, maybe we take them alive, let proper judge sort this. Dalton's face went dark with fury. In that moment, Boone saw the man's true nature, not just corrupt, but genuinely dangerous. Man who'd kill anyone threatening his plans. Sheriff drew his sidearm, pointed directly at Mara. I've heard enough lies. Shot rang across water, but wasn't Dalton who fired. Grizzled veteran put bullet in ground at Sheriff's feet, rifle smoking. That's Tom Whitman's daughter you're pointing gun at. Veteran said, voice carrying absolute conviction. I'll be damned if I watch you murder her in cold blood. Confrontation exploded into chaos. Half Dalton's men suddenly pointing weapons at each other instead of Boone's group, voices raised in angry argument. Some still supporting Sheriff, others having second thoughts. In confusion, Dalton spurred his horse directly into Creek, pistol still trained on Mara. Want something done right? Do it yourself. Current caught his horse immediately, animal struggling to keep footing in rushing water. But Dalton was experienced rider, managed to keep moving toward far bank. Get in the water. Boone told Isabel, fever-clouded mind, still clear enough to see their chance. All of us. If we reach the other side, you can barely stand. Then help me. They plunged into creek together, icy water hitting Boone like physical blow. Fever broke instantly cold, shocking his system back to something approaching clarity. But current was stronger than expected within seconds, all fighting just to keep heads above water. Mara was swept downstream, first current catching her like giant hand. "Help!" she screamed, disappearing beneath muddy surface. Without thinking, Boone dove after her damaged body, protesting every stroke. Found her hair in the murk, hauled her up gasping and choking. "Got you," he said, wrapping arm around her waist. "Got you." But Dalton had made it halfway across when his horse stepped in hidden hole. Animal went down screaming, throwing rider into rushing water. Sheriff disappeared beneath surface, came up sputtering, hat gone, carefully pomaded hair plastered to skull. Still had his gun, still close enough to use it. "This ends now," he shouted, raising pistol despite water swirling around chest. First shot meant for Mara took Boone in right shoulder as he shielded her. Impact spun him around, sent him under surface, muddy water rushing into lungs. Second shot went wide as current pulled Dalton off balance. Third shot shattered against rocks near Isabel's head. Fourth shot, through murky water. Boone could see Dalton struggling for another shot, could see Isabel and Mara trying to reach him. Current was too strong, wounded body, too weak, darkness closing around vision's edges. But he could also see something else. Riders on both banks, now some pointing rifles at each other. Voices raised in violent argument. Dalton's posse was tearing itself apart. Last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was multiple gunshots muffled by water, but unmistakably final. Someone had ended the standoff. Question was who? Day 4 dawned clear and cold in the line shack, where Boone found himself when consciousness returned. Someone had built up fire in stone hearth, wrapped him in wool blankets. Right shoulder was immobilized in proper sling-clean bandages, covering both bullet wounds. Taste of creek water finally gone, replaced by bitter aftertaste of laudanum. "About time you woke," familiar voice said from across room. "Thought we'd be digging you a grave after all." Boone turned head, carefully saw Jonas Briggs sitting at rough table, no longer bound and gagged. The marshal looked none worse, except for spectacular bruise covering left side of his head. "What happened?" "Well, after you took that bullet and went under, things got real interesting." Briggs moved closer, so Boone could hear clearly. "See when Sheriff Dalton tried to shoot Miss Mara while she was saving your hide that was too much for his own men. Turns out even hired guns have limits." Isabel appeared in Boone's vision, face, clean hair, neatly braided. She'd found proper dress blue calico, bringing out her eyes, and haunted look was finally beginning to fade. Jake Morrison, the grizzled one, put next bullet right through Dalton's chest. She said quiet. Said he wouldn't watch good man drown while corrupt sheriff murdered innocent women. "The Dalton's dead. The dead as Christmas." Briggs confirmed. Soon as he was floating face down in Willow's Creek, rest of his men decided they'd had enough. Amazing how quick posse changes mind when man paying them stops breathing. Mara appeared beside her sister, carrying steaming cups smelling of beef broth. She looked different, stronger, more confident, like weight of fear had finally lifted. "Marshal Briggs has been explaining things," she said, helping Boone sit up enough to drink. "About the federal investigation, why he was really here." Briggs settled back in chair, wincing as he touched head bruise. "Been tracking corruption in this territory better part of a year. Dalton was suspected of all kinds of crimes, land fraud, murder, selling prisoners to slavers, but he was too careful, too connected. Needed him to make mistake big enough to hang him with. And I provided that mistake, Boone said, understanding dawning. You provided the catalyst. Briggs corrected. When you bought these ladies at auction, forced Dalton's hand. He had to move fast to silence witnesses, made him sloppy. Gave us evidence we needed to bring down his whole operation. Pieces falling into place in Boone's mind. Auction at Lantern's End hadn't been just about selling women, it was bait in federal trap to catch corrupt sheriff. His desperate rescue was convenient tool in larger investigation. You used us. Isabel said, anger in her voice. All of us. Let innocent people walk into mortal danger so you could gather evidence. Federal law requires proof of criminal activity, not just suspicions. Briggs replied without apology. Sometimes good people get hurt bringing bad people to justice. That's price of civilized society. What about the land? Mara asked. Our father's ranch. Briggs smiled, first time since Boone regained consciousness. Already being sorted by federal judge. Forged papers exposed Dalton's accomplices being rounded up. Broken W Ranch returning to rightful owners. You'll have your inheritance within month. Through cabin's window, Boone could see riders approaching dozen men in blue uniforms, riding in organized formation, marking them as federal cavalry. At their head rode tall officer with Colonel Eagle's saber glinting in morning sun. That'll be Colonel Morrison, Briggs said, following Boone's gaze. Jake Morrison's younger brother. He's been leading federal response to corruption in this territory. Door opened to admit the Colonel, lean man with graying hair, eyes like flint chips. He moved with controlled precision of career soldier, and when his gaze fell on Boone, there was recognition, one veteran acknowledging another. Mr. Cassidy, Colonel Morrison said with slight bow. I'm told we owe considerable debt of gratitude. Just did what seemed right. What seemed right nearly got you killed, Colonel observed. But also helped us clean up one of most corrupt counties in territory. Sheriff Dalton's operation was bigger than initially suspected. Judges, land officials, even territorial legislators in his pocket. What happens now? Isabel asked. Now we finish cleaning house, Morrison replied. Dalton's associates will stand trial. Stolen land returned to rightful owners. Territory will finally have honest law enforcement. Colonel's expression softened as he looked at three survivors. As for immediate future, you're all free to go wherever you choose. Charges dropped, bounties rescinded. You have territorial government's apology for what you endured. But even as relief flooded through him, Boone felt strange emptiness. 3 days he'd had purpose protecting Isabel and Mara, staying ahead of pursuers, fighting for something that mattered. Now immediate danger was over. He was just another broken-down ex-soldier with nowhere particular to go. There is one more thing, Colonel Morrison said, reading his thoughts. Territorial Marshal Service is expanding. Need men with military experience who understand difference between justice and vengeance. Pays good, works dangerous. You'd be serving your country again. Generous offer, kind of opportunity Boone never expected. Chance to wear badge, be part of something larger, make real difference in land desperately needing honest men with guns. But considering Colonel's words, his eyes found Isabel and Mara. They watched him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Not fear, but resigned understanding. They knew he'd leave. Men like him always did, drawn by duty or wanderlust or simple inability to settle. Appreciate the offer, Colonel, Boone said slow. Think I'll pass. Morrison raised eyebrow. May I ask why? Boone looked toward distant mountains, thinking about Broken W Ranch, all the work that would need doing. Fences to mend cattle, to brand buildings, to repair after years of neglect. Would take years to restore property to former prosperity, require steady, unglamorous work most men avoided, but would also mean waking every morning to see sunrise over land, belonging to people he'd come to care about, mean being part of something permanent, something lasting long after he was gone. And suddenly, he was thinking of Tommy Morrison again. Not the boy dying in his dreams, but the daguerreotype he'd carried. Mother and sister back in Ohio waiting for letter that would never come. Women who'd loved a soldier and lost him to someone else's war. Isabel and Mara had already lost enough to other people's conflicts. Maybe it was time for someone to stay. "Reckon I've had enough soldiering," he said finally. "Time to try being something else." 1 week later, Boone sat on wide porch of Broken W Ranch House, watching sun set over 10,000 acres of finest grazing land in 3 territories. His shoulder still ached, and probably always would when weather changed. But Army surgeon had done good work. With time and rest, he'd regain most strength. Ranch House was larger than expected, 2-story structure of local stone and timber, wraparound porch windows catching evening light like jewels. Spoke of prosperity and permanence family that had put down deep roots and intended to stay. Isabel emerged from kitchen carrying pitcher of lemonade, 3 glasses on wooden tray. She'd traded simple dress for riding clothes, leather skirt, cotton blouse suiting her practical nature, and last bruises had faded from her face. "Mara's in stable with that chestnut stallion," she said, settling into chair beside him. "Says he's got makings of fine breeding horse if we can gentle him properly." "Smart horse," Boone replied, accepting glass gratefully. "Probably saved all our lives back in Lantern's End." They sat in comfortable silence, watching cattle move across grassland in distance. Federal marshals had spent weeks sorting through Dalton's fraudulent paperwork. But essential facts were clear. Whitman's sisters owned one of the largest, most valuable ranches in territory. "Colonel Morrison stopped by this morning while you were napping," Isabel said after a while. "Says Geological Survey Dalton was interested in turned out accurate. Really is gold on back 40 enough to make us rich if we wanted to sell mining rights." "You thinking about it?" Mara was for a while. Said maybe time to move to San Francisco, live like proper ladies in proper city. Isabel smiled, but something wistful in it. "Wear fancy dresses, go to opera, marry respectable men who work in banks, and never get hands dirty." Boone studied her profile against sunset. "But you don't want that. This land's been in our family 15 years. My father built this house with his own hands, dug well that still gives sweet water, planted apple trees shading kitchen garden." She gestured toward rolling grassland, stretching to horizon. "Selling it all for gold money feels like betraying everything he worked for." "And what's Mara think now?" "She's coming around. Turns out she's got more of our father in her than either of us realized, just needed time to remember who she was before Dalton tried to break her spirit." As if summoned by conversation, Mara appeared around house corner, leading chestnut stallion by rope halter. Horse moved calmly beside her, no longer panicked animal they'd encountered in burning stable. Like its handler, seemed to have found strength again. "Colonel Morrison left something for you," Mara called as she approached porch. "Said it belonged to you by right." She handed him familiar object, his service revolver, walnut grip, polished to high shine barrel gleaming in evening light. Someone had cleaned and oiled it with obvious care, and checking cylinder, he found it fully loaded with fresh ammunition. "Also left this." Mara continued pulling leather money pouch from pocket. Much larger than small bag that once contained his life savings, clinked heavily with coins. "Reward money from territorial government. $500 for services to federal law enforcement." Boone stared at the money mind, reeling. $500 was more than most men saw in 3 years, enough to buy land, start business, build new life anywhere he chose. "That's considerable money," he said quiet. "Enough to set yourself up anywhere in country." Isabel agreed. "California, Oregon, maybe back east, where there's cities and civilization." Something in her tone made Boone look at her more closely. She was trying to sound casual, but he could hear underlying tension, fear that he'd take money and leave, that bonds forged in shared ordeal weren't strong enough to hold him. "Or," Mara added, settling into third chair on porch, "you could invest it in Broken W. We're going to need capital to rebuild what Dalton let fall apart, and good ranch always needs another working partner. Boone looked out over vast grassland, thinking about work ahead. House needed repairs, barns needed rebuilding, fences down all over property. Would take years to restore ranch to former prosperity, require steady, unglamorous labor most men avoided, but would also mean being part of something permanent, something outlasting all of them. Mean waking every morning with purpose, sleeping every night with satisfaction of work well done. Most important, mean being part of family, something he'd never had, even before. War took everything else, and thinking of family, he remembered Tommy Morrison one more time. Not the dying boy in his nightmares, but the laughing kid who'd shown him that daguerreotype. "That's my ma and sister back in Ohio," Tommy had said, voice full of pride and homesickness. "Someday, I'm gonna go back there, help Ma run the farm, maybe find myself a good woman like my sister." Tommy never got his chance to go home to be part of something larger than war and death and duty, but maybe, just maybe, Boone could have what his young friend had dreamed of. "Equal partners?" he asked. "Equal partners," Isabel confirmed. 1/3 each, all of us having say in how ranches run. And if one wants to leave, then other two buy out their share at fair market value, Mara said. But nobody gets forced out, nobody gets cheated. Boone hefted money pouch, feeling its weight. $500 would be enough to start over, somewhere else, disappear into vastness of American frontier, become someone new. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine it, riding out tomorrow morning with possessions tied behind saddle, following sunset toward whatever lay beyond horizon. But sitting there on porch with Isabel and Mara, watching first stars appear in darkening sky, he realized he was already exactly where he wanted to be. "Well then," he said, tucking money pouch into shirt pocket, "I reckon we better get started on those repairs come morning." Isabel's smile was like sunrise after long dark night. "Welcome home, Boone Cassidy." And for first time in more years than he could count, Boone felt like he truly was home. As full darkness settled over Broken W Ranch, 3 silhouettes remained on porch, no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance, but partners in work of building something lasting in harsh and beautiful land. Price of their freedom had been higher than any could have imagined, but bonds forged in that crucible had proven stronger than chains, more valuable than gold, more enduring than mountains watching over their valley. In distance, nightbird called softly across grassland, and sound carried on wind like promise of better days ahead. Somewhere in the darkness, Boone could almost hear Tommy Morrison's voice, approving and proud. "That's the way, Sergeant. That's how you come home."